So a woman goes to a butcher shop and she orders 2 pounds of ground beef. The butcher takes some ground beef, drops it on the scale, and it's 2 pounds exactly. The woman says, "Luck, you're just lucky." No, the butcher says, "That's not luck, that's 30 years of experience." So she says, okay, let's try it out. Give me a chuck roast exactly 3.5 pounds. The butcher goes in the back, cuts the meat, puts it on the scale. Spot on. 3.5 pounds exactly. Not an ounce of variance. And at about that moment, a woman in the butcher shop, her water breaks right there in the butcher shop. Everyone scrambles to help, but there's too much traffic outside. Can't get through. It's going to take too long. So it's decided she's going to deliver the baby right there, right in the front of the butcher shop. Fortunately, there's a nurse on hand to help her out, and after the baby is delivered, the nurse says, "Wow, he's a big one. Must be about 8 pounds or so." "Let me see," the butcher says. He picks up the baby and sort of does one of these, and he says, No, this is just shy of 7.5 pounds. They argue for a moment, the 30 years experience of the butcher versus the 20 years experience of the nurse. And then the butcher's apprentice appears from behind the counter. He says, "Let me settle this." So he takes the baby in the back, and a moment later he comes back out and announces 5 pounds exactly. "What?" everyone says. "There's no way." "Yep," the apprentice says. "I checked twice. 5 pounds, emptied and deboned." Anyway, let's talk about some horror movies. Well, I finally finished watching the May of 2024 HorrorPack movies, so a review seems to be in order. That's our business for today. As is my way, I'm reviewing every movie that came out of the most recent HorrorPack. That be these right here. In case you're new here, welcome, and in case you don't know about HorrorPack, it's a monthly horror movie subscription service. I usually like what they send me, and I also like to review them here on this channel, so be sure to subscribe, ring my bell, like this video, and most importantly, by whatever means, those are good means, but by whatever means you prefer, stick around if you want to see me talk about anything and everything to do with horror. As always, there are also purchase links to all of these movies right down there in the What's It, so if you don't get HorrorPack for yourself, but if you still want to see some good movies, I've already found them all for you, and you can help support my channel if you buy from my links. But without further ado, let's talk about the movies themselves. First up is Willy's Wonderland. This was the one out of this bunch that I had seen before, so when I opened it up and did my unboxing video, I already offered some remarks at that time. But now I've rewatched it, and I have to say, my thoughts really haven't changed all that much. It's basically an off-brand Five Nights at Freddy's story, although this actually came out before the official Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Although, of course, not before the games. And what I mean when I say it's an off-brand Five Nights at Freddy's is that it's the story of a guy trapped overnight in a children's entertainment kind of restaurant where he needs to fight against very much alive and very much evil animatronic characters. In this case, Nicolas Cage is in the lead doing his usual insane kind of performance. In this case, as a character without much backstory who exists literally only as a vehicle for Cagean shenanigans. And in that regard, it's glorious. Oh, sure, you can complain and say it's not a very good movie. You're right. It isn't. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be Nick Cage fighting evil animatronics, and it delivers that in spades. I certainly can't call this A-level filmmaking, but it's a solid B, and that's exactly what it intends to be. Next we have Stoker Hills. When I read the description, it said it was about some people who were making a horror movie and accidentally witness a crime. So I was expecting it might be a found footage movie, but while there are a few found footage elements and some found footage scenes, it's actually overall not that. That is the premise, but it also involves one of their cast members getting captured by the killer, and a story involving some police detectives trying to catch said killer. What follows that kidnapping scene is a bit discontinuous, as the film fluctuates between being a kind of semi-slasher movie in scenes with the killer and his victims, and then more of a police procedural as the detectives try to crack the case before time runs out. It does feature Tony Todd in a small role as a film professor who shows up just at the beginning and the end, which is always nice to see. But I also have to admit, I was a bit worried at the start, as despite Tony Todd's presence, the opening just really wasn't working for me. But after a while, 15-20 minutes in or so, once everything is sort of established and the plot takes over on its own, it ends up being not too bad. Obviously, we're talking about a low-budget movie here, and it does have some flaws, but I also see a lot of good in it. Overall, I'd call it a strong effort. It certainly could have been tighter. Some of the writing probably could have used another edit, and some of the scenes are certainly too long. And either the ending is too predictable, or I've just seen way too many horror movies and can predict them much too fast. I'm not sure which is the case. But if you like low-budget horror, it's got some interesting kills, some decent low-budget gore, and it's the sort of thing that'll certainly keep you entertained. I'll give this one, let's say, a B-. Next up is The Devil's Dolls, which I've discovered is also called Worry Dolls in some releases. Not sure about the reason for the name change, but it is what it is. This one opens right in the middle of a pretty brutal scene. We have this woman in the process of escaping from a terrifying serial killer who himself gets killed by the police just in time for her to get away. We pick up with the story the movie is actually going to be about just after those events, as the police officers involved are trying to sort of put their lives back together after spending so much time dealing with such a horrifying case. But the lead detective's daughter ends up accidentally taking some dolls that had belonged to the killer out of her father's car, and these seem to unleash the killer's evil, causing those who possess them to commit atrocities of their own, very much in the style of the killer. I have to say, this is very much a by-the-book kind of horror movie. It follows a well-established formula and doesn't really deviate from that formula ever. So if you're looking for originality in your cinema, this ain't the movie for you. However, formulaic though it may be, and it certainly is that, it follows the formula well. Despite a low budget, it has good production value. It's well acted, the script is reasonably tight, and so within that formula, it does everything correctly. This is actually pretty good evidence of why the formula works. People have already established a lot of these tropes, and if you follow them, you'll have an entertaining movie. It just might not be a particularly memorable movie, because shortly after you watch it, it will end up blending in your memory with all the other films that also followed the same formula. At the end of it all, though, I'll give this one a B+. It's far from perfect, but it's probably the most effective, serious horror movie in this month's bunch. And we finish up this batch of 4 with Sequel, Cruel Summer 2. I reviewed Cruel Summer, the original, Part 1, as part of last month's package. It was a fun micro-budget slasher that wasn't honestly a good movie, but it had a lot of heart. I ended up giving it a C+ and saying it would make for a really enjoyable movie night as long as you knew what it was and didn't take it too seriously. Now for this month's HorrorPack exclusive, I should clarify it's exclusive number 95, we have this sequel, which is even called sequel, so I think you already begin to get a sense of just how seriously we're meant to take these movies. In this one, the survivors of the first one reunite and decide to deal with their trauma by producing a stage play about their experiences. But, of course, as they start their work, the killings begin again. And honestly, my review is... There's a fly in here. That's gonna drive me nuts. Anyway, my review of this one is going to be pretty much the same as my review of the first one. Holy mackerel, it's right on my light. My review of this one is gonna be the same as my review of the first one. This one deviates, I would say, from the sort of classicism or classic model of a slasher film, which was very much evident in the first film. This one deviates from that a little bit, and it certainly strains credulity, but somehow it ends up still working in a way. The first one was more cheesy, and this one, if I can be forgiven for making a distinction even I don't quite understand, feels more goofy rather than cheesy, but it's still a fun one to watch, particularly if you're with some friends who also like this kind of thing. Maybe you can MST3K it. I'll stick to what I said on the other one and give this one also a respectable C+ grade. So that brings us to the end of yet another review video. Apparently it took me all month to watch even just these 4 movies, and I say all month because I have just received the June HorrorPack right the very same day as I set out to record this. Right here. So stay tuned for my unboxing video of that, and indeed stay tuned for all of my reviews and various other horror-related videos. But for now, these 4 wonderful movies under my belt, it's time for me to make my exit. So, until then, take care and stay scared.